One of the great figures in running that almost no one has heard of is a man named Bill Bowerman. He was this legendary track and field coach who more or less helped bring all these athletes to the Olympics, and they won medals and things of that nature. And he was also sort of this mad scientist type. And so he was always making these tiny adjustments to shoes just to get a little bit better performance out of his athletes. And a lot of these adjustments and these innovations got picked up by the biggest shoe companies in the world and are still in use today. And another thing that Bill Bowerman did was he wrote a book called Jogging, which is about jogging, obviously. And one of the key ideas that he was trying to get across was something that had bothered him for a number of decades at this point. And that is that people make the mistake of thinking only elite Olympians are athletes. But everyone is an athlete, he said. If you have a body, you are an athlete. And he was trying to get this across because people were always having this issue with, again, this is in the 60s and 70s, people had this issue where they were sort of just discounting jogging because they didn't consider themselves athletes, the same way that people wouldn't lift weights because they didn't consider themselves bodybuilders. And I find this thought very interesting because I also feel this exact same way about philosophy. Philosophy is something that people just don't really resonate with it because they think, if they think about it at all, of people from 2,000 years ago who sat down and they yapped and they came up with these cool different ideas about the world and all of these different theories that did more or less shape the world that we live in today. But at the same time, it seems inaccessible. They think, well, these are the greatest minds of all time, so what do I have in common with them? And then there's also the aspect of it that it is considered also a little bit pretentious, which is fair. And this is something that we're trying to get away from because more or less, philosophy as a word just simply comes from the Greek words of philo, which is to love, and sophia, which is wisdom. And so that's all that philosophy is. It's just the love of wisdom. And I think all of us here, we'd be open to a little bit of wisdom, right? If someone handed it to you, would we say, no, we're okay, thank you? Probably not, right? We're open to it. And so if that's the case, and we are down for wisdom, we can all be a little bit wiser, then the next logical question becomes, how do we develop wisdom? And I consulted with an oracle, which is just Google, or a search engine. And it says that gaining wisdom involves a lifelong commitment to learning from experience, reflecting deeply on life, acting with virtue, and seeking knowledge from diverse sources. More or less, these are things that we're already doing, right? As long as we stay open, as long as we stay curious, as you live your life, you're going to collect new experience, which can then be converted into wisdom. So it's something that is more or less accessible to all of us. But one of the misconceptions may be where it says seeking knowledge from diverse sources. A lot of people may think we have to go find the greatest minds who have ever lived to be these diverse sources that we can learn from. We have to go find Einstein or whoever would be very smart. But the diverse sources that are actually available to all of us is just the people around us, I believe anyways, because I believe that each and every one of us has our own philosophy that got us to where we are in life, and no matter how different someone may seem to us, even if we completely disagree with them, there is something that we can still learn from everyone if we're willing to listen. Even if you're learning how not to think, how not to be, there's still something that you can learn. And so with this as a general idea, a few years back I was living in Mexico and I wanted to have a conversation around ideas. I wanted to find a place where I could have discussions about ideas, but there was nothing around, so I decided to start it. And I decided to host an event and call it Practical Philosophy, and I didn't really have any plan for it. I more or less just invited a bunch of people over to my living room. I'm a big fan of book quotes, so I just prepared a bunch of book quotes, and I was like, I'm going to read these, and if at any point anyone wants to say something, feel free, and we'll have a conversation about it. But I had no idea how it was going to go, so I was just reading these book quotes. It was kind of boring at first. And then eventually my buddy interrupts me and he's like, actually, yeah, that's a great quote, thank you. I want to go around the table and ask every person here, do you think that everything happens for a reason? And when we went person to person, everyone answered the question, and then at the same time, they gave a personal story, or they gave their perspective on how they made it to this conclusion. And it was actually this very beautiful discussion that we had where more or less we all just, like something in the air changed, and we just were like, okay, this was a very rocky start, but this is actually incredible, and we want to do this every single week from now on. So we decided to more or less get rid of the book quotes, no more book quotes. And we decided we're going to do this every single week. So all that we would do was we would pick one topic, AI and its impacts, authenticity, loyalty, and then we have jump-off points. And these jump-off points are just designed so that we can get the conversation flowing, and then we can bounce this idea around off of one another. And so we operate these meetups with the idea that there's no reading that anyone has to do, there's no studying that anyone needs to do beforehand, and there's no real ideology at the same time. So there's no one there who can tell you what you're supposed to think. There's no guru. The idea behind it is, as you hear people's perspectives, depending on where you are in your life, certain things are going to resonate with you, and that you can take that away and you can reflect on it later. And so as we started hosting these every single week, it started growing. 30, 40 people started showing up to my apartment. It started growing to the point that, security pulled me inside, and they're like, "What's going on, man? What are you doing?" I'm like, "These are the philosophers." Get them out of here. So we had to relocate. We had to keep finding new places. And then as it kept growing, we had to also learn how to separate into groups, add guidelines, things like that, just so people wouldn't fight each other, things of that nature. But it kept gaining momentum. People just kept wanting to show up for these discussions. And so when I came back to Hamilton, we opened one here. And then I also moved briefly to Valencia in Spain, and we opened one there as well. And same thing, people just kept coming and showing up. And then I would have people reach out and say that, they went back to visit their parents after going to many of these practical philosophy events, and they visited their parents, and everyone was talking about politics, religion, whatever heated idea it is. And although everyone else was getting animated, they were able to keep it civil, and they were able to stay calm in this situation where other people were disagreeing with them. And so it was this thing where we realized that we accidentally, more or less, trained ourselves to have conversations with people that we may not necessarily agree with. We didn't know this at the time, but studies do show that having conversations with people you don't agree with significantly reduce negative beliefs and attitudes towards that group of people. And so it was also helping to more or less bring together social cohesion. And this is something I think we can all be down with. We're a little bit polarized right now, but we're realizing that these conversations were actually kind of bringing us together and teaching us new perspectives to look at. But we didn't know that. All we wanted to do was get in a circle and talk about ideas. And so we just kept doing that. And as we kept doing it, again, consistently, people would reach out and they would say, "This is incredible, great conversation. I'm from out of town. How do I bring this to my community?" And because we had already developed this general, semi-structured layout for how we're doing this, it was actually fairly easy to duplicate. There was a lot of problems with it. And I used to not have gray hair, but now I do. But it was doable, right? It was doable. We managed to open some more, and then it kept growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing. Anyway, we got pretty much everywhere. And at this point, now we're hosting more than 200 of these meetings every single month in more than 35 countries. And we have more than 30,000 annual attendees every year who just show up and have these conversations. It's crazy because this whole thing just started from an idea of, let's get into my living room and have a conversation and see what happens from there. And it grew to a place that I would never have expected it to, right? I didn't know that there was this many people into philosophy. We just started with a couple people in my living room, and then if you were to go to the Toronto group, there's 150 people in a room. We all split into groups and things like that. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we try to keep in mind is that this is what it's all about, is just getting at a table or in a park or in a cafe and discussing ideas. And this is something where I believe that if you are open to questioning your assumptions and you're open to hearing new perspectives, that is philosophy. And that's something that's accessible to every single one of us. And I hear all the time people say how much this has changed their life and how much benefit they're getting from it. So I would just recommend everyone, after this, here's an easy thing to do. When you go home, just pick a random topic. These are 3 that we've done: dating, loyalty, authenticity, that people really love. These are certified bangers. We've been doing this for a long time. And just go pick one of these topics, invite some friends over and say, "We're going to talk about this, and we're going to see what happens." And what you're going to find is you'll hear different perspectives from your friends that don't normally come up in conversation. At the same time, as you reflect on that later, you're going to be able to develop wisdom and learn a little bit more about yourself. And so this development of wisdom, this is philosophy. And I believe this form of philosophy is something that the world needs right now, in terms of we need to talk to one another. We need to talk to one another, and we need to also be conscientious and develop ourselves at the same time. Thank you.